Well, hello, boys and girls. Here we are in the wheat fields of where I grew up, good old Corac. Well, I'm going to tell you a little story about my great-granduncle, Oliver Matthew James Goldsmith. Unfortunately, boys and girls, this story has a little bit of a sad ending, but I do want to share it with you because it's an important story to tell. This story is about Oliver Matthew James Goldsmith, and he was my great-granduncle. And you can see him here looking very smart in his AIF World War I uniform. But sadly, as you can see, he's got a headstone there, and if you peer closely enough, you'll see that he died at the age of 22. Yes, he did. Well, you've seen this picture before, haven't you, if you've been watching my other history stories? So this is the Goldsmith family. My great-great-grandfather, Henry, and his good lady wife, Mary Ann. And they had quite a few children, as you can see. Now, the one in the middle up in the back row, that is my great-grandmother, Alicia Jane. Now, the two circled are the second youngest children of the family, and they are twins, Oliver and Lilian. Isn't that cute, little twinsies? So here we can see dear little Oliver when he was just a little tot. Now, he was born on the 26th of April, 1894, out on the farm at Corac, which is not far from where I grew up out at Corac East. So yes, he was up there. Now, if you have a look at the clothing and everything, and yes, the family did have a little bit of money, but because they worked hard doing the whole farming thing, and they started building this house out at Corac, and they added to it and added to it and added to it, and it finished up quite a big house. But this is it when it was very first built. Now, in 1909, the family made the move. It was quite a drought here in this area, but they heard that there was lots of green, lush growth available cheaply up along the Condamine River on the Dalby Plains of Queensland. So they thought they'd go and check it out. Now, this picture here is of my great-great-grandfather Henry, as you can see at the front there, and his little party of followers, his merry band of followers, because the group of people, there was a whole lot of them from the area of Corac who actually left here and went up there to do this prickly pear selection farming. And what it was there was so much prickly pear taking over the countryside, the government was actually offering to lease the land really cheaply to farmers if they would clear the land of the prickly pear at the same time as they were farming. So, this is the advance party that headed off up to Queensland to check it all out. One person, Andy Riley, he went up there first and came back and said, yep, all good to go. And so then this is the next party of men that took off up there to go up to Queensland to check it all out. Now, Henry, when he got up there, organised for this beautiful big Queenslander house to be built. Lovely big typical Queenslander here. And just so you can see it in all its glory with its lovely gardens, there's a better picture of it there. There are a couple more somewhere, but I just couldn't put my finger on them this morning, so you'll just have to make do with those two. The point I'm trying to get across by showing you the houses and not telling you about Oliver is that Oliver had a reasonably privileged childhood and growing up into his youth and into adulthood. And he was 15 when the family moved up to Queensland. And so this is what he's arrived up there to. And so the Goldsmiths made quite a splash with their beautiful big home and the group of people that went up with them that were all known collectively as the Goldsmith Group. And if you don't believe me, hop onto Trove, which I've mentioned before, which is the newspaper archive run by the National Library. And if you search up Goldsmith Group, you'll get all these articles will start coming up. So I'm just going to show you one of those little articles now. Well, I'm not going to show you. I'm going to read it to you. Well, maybe I'll show you. Should I show you? Right, there we go. So it was quite big news, the fact that this group of farmers had gone up to Queensland from Victoria to do prickly pear farming, as we call it, because that's what they were pretty much doing, although they weren't actually farming the prickly pear, they were getting rid of it. But anyway, this was printed in the Sydney Mail and New South Wales newspaper, and under a big section of all different news around the countryside. Victorian farmers are still displaying a considerable interest in the land available for farming in this state. They are not even discouraged by the fact that some areas are thickly infested with prickly pear. Now, I think the reason for that is because it was such a bad drought down here at the time, and I think that it was about their 6th year in drought. So by the time they got up there in, 1909, 1910 or so, prickly pear was nothing because there was so much still good feed and greenness along the Condamine River. And then it goes on. If the land is good and cheap, they are willing to try conclusions even with a pest of that sort. It is stated the government is negotiating for surrender of Red Marley and Mile Grove runs, which these were pastoral runs where what we called the old-fashioned squatter could run loads and loads of sheep, right? So the government took those leases of those runs back and then let them back out to the farmers. So Red Marley and Mile Grove is the land that my ancestors went to. So it says the surrender of Red Marley and Mile Grove runs comprising of about 29,000 acres, but which is held under lease extending up to 20 to 30 years. The land is situated on the Condamine River about 25 miles south of the Miles railway station. It is extensively infested with pear, and I have seen some photos of it, and it was very infested with prickly pear. A group of 13 members, and when we say there was 13 farmers, but then there was all their families. So this was a big move. A group of 13 members, to be known as the Goldsmith Group, has been formed, and the land will be thrown open for selection in blocks of 2,000 acres. It is looked upon as being a splendid piece of agricultural country. Victorians are going at it to conquer or perish in the attempt. The leaders of the group are Mr. Harry Goldsmith, that's my great-great-grandfather, and Messrs. Morgan, Sheehan and Postick brothers, all of whom are from the Wimmera district. They are credited with having a combined capital of £50,000, all of which is to be embarked in the venture to reclaim a rich piece of country now overrun with the pear pest. So just give you an idea of what they were going up into. Let's have a look at some more photos, shall we? Here we've got a bunch of rough-looking little lads, haven't we? Now, Oliver had a couple of really close friends, and one of them's name was Mick Sheehan, which is the very tall guy at the back, and then another one's name is Floyd Kane, which is the one over standing at the back with the big moustache. And, yeah, not sure about the two in the front, but the other one at the back, with the fag hanging out of his mouth, is Oliver. Now, I just want to point out that if you actually have a look, Oliver's standing on ground that's quite a bit higher than what Floyd's standing on, but he's very slightly built and not very tall. So just keep that in mind as we move through the story. When World War I came around, Oliver had tried to enlist a couple of times, but he had actually been knocked back because of his physique. And I think originally he didn't meet the height requirement. And then as the war progressed and so many men were killed and the war was a lot worse than what anyone thought at the time, they needed more soldiers. And the only way that was going to happen was if they relaxed the rules. And so as they relaxed the rules, people could then, that had it previously applied, could apply again. And that is what happened in Oliver's situation. Right, so according to the Brisbane Courier, several of these people volunteered on the 31st of August at Miles, which is a town not far from Dalby, which is the closest town to where their farm was. And amongst those was OMG. And I think it's funny now because we say OMG, but back then, when they named him Oliver Matthew Goldsmith, there is a J in there at times, but Oliver Matthew Goldsmith, they wouldn't have thought that his initials would become such a thing, but yeah, OMG. So they enlisted and they sailed off to England after their basic training on the Boonar. And this is the mighty Boonar here, looking very resplendent, but not necessarily very comfortable, because I'm pretty sure this was not a cruise liner before it started carrying the troops over to England. And here's the boys once they got over there. Well, look, I'm just going to leave it because I just can't find where I wrote down which one was which. But anyway, Oliver's in that photo. And look, I'm just going to say that for a young lad that started off in Korak, which it never snows here. We're in the middle of Victoria where it never snows. And then he's moved up to Queensland, which is probably one of the warmer places in Australia where it's not going to snow. And they get over to England and they've got ice and snow that they can build snowmen for the first time. So, yeah, they thought it was pretty cool to be able to send this image home. So what am I showing you? I'm going to show you part of Oliver's war service records, just to show you what I am talking about. And if we actually have a look at this is his on enlistment. They filled this out, and he was aged 22 and 2 months. He was 5'3". Yes, he was. And he weighed only 132 pounds. His chest measurement was 35 normal and 37 if he... Now, I do believe that was a little bit of a thing to see how well, like these days we'd measure how much oxygen you could take in, but they didn't have that sort of equipment at the enlistment places, so that's what they would do. They would do this chest measurement. And I believe that on some of his earlier tries to get in, he'd also flunked that measurement. It says he has a fair complexion, grey eyes, auburn hair, so a bit of a ranger there. That's what we call a redhead in Australia. And of Methodist denomination. And he had a scar on the underside of his right leg. No, on his lip. A scar on the underside of his right lip. So there's a little thing here where they have to sign it to say, you know, that they've examined the person and made sure that they didn't have things like syphilis, hernias, varicose veins, all those sorts of things. And so, yes, we'll keep going down here. And then we're going to go to this one. So this tells us here. So he embarked at Brisbane on the Boona on the 21st of the 10th, 1916, and disembarked at Plymouth on the 10th of January, 1917. Now, let's see. 21st of October, November, December, and another half a month. So 2.5 months on that ship. And I'm going to say they got over there in the middle of winter. They've left here just at the end of the cooler months. So it wouldn't have been great weather on that ship. So they got over there and had a chance to, as you saw, take the odd photo with the snowman, you know, that sort of thing. And then he began to feel unwell. And then eventually they've written the wrong year in here. That's funny. I just noticed this, and it's the first time I've noticed it in all the times I've looked at his records. It actually says the 12th of the 2nd, 16, but it's actually 2017 by now. And so, yeah, just over a month after he has disembarked, and they did some basic training in that Fargo area, he was then admitted to the hospital, the military hospital at Fargo, with bronchitis. And it says here in brackets, seriously ill. So that's a bit sad, isn't it? So here's a photo of Bill Sheehan and young Oliver. And I'm not sure whether this was taken before they left, but I'm going to say very likely, because they wouldn't have had much of a chance to go and get portraits done once they were over there, given what happened next. So I'm going to now just go to another slideshow. Go to the next slide, and I'm going to read to you what happened next. And the photo that you're looking at was taken by Bill Sheehan, and that's actually a photograph of Oliver's funeral procession, and that gives you a hint at what happened next. So this is dated the 17th of February 1917. It's a letter from Bill Sheehan to Henry and Mary Ann. Dear Mr. and Mrs. Goldsmith, it is with deepest regret that I sit down to write and give you particulars of Oliver's death. As you are probably aware by a letter I wrote you, he went to Fargo Military Hospital on Sunday, February the 11th. For 4 days previous to being admitted, he was certainly off colour a good deal, but he did not show or feel any symptoms to cause anxiety, as I was sleeping and was continually with him until the ambulance took him to the hospital. On Monday night, about 8 o'clock, the hospital authorities rang up and informed our OC that he was dangerously ill, and if he had any particular friends to tell them. Mr. Mitchell, our OC, informed me, and I, together with Mick Kane and another chap, walked over. After finding the ward he was in, we asked the sister in charge to allow us to see him. At first she refused, but after explaining things a little, she allowed me to go in alone, but only for 3 minutes. When I spoke to him, I was quite surprised to see him in such good spirits and appearance, which wasn't what we were led to believe. We chatted together for about 5 minutes, during which time he told me he was beginning to feel better, as he had just had a bath. On Tuesday morning, Mick and I were off parade and went over and saw him and found him feeling a lot better. On Wednesday, neither of us were allowed off parade in the daytime, and we had night operations after dark, which stopped us both again. On Thursday the 15th, we were informed that he had succumbed to pneumonia. And boy, do I know how bad pneumonia can be. And I was here in my nice warm home, in my nice warm bed. And he was over there in an army tent. On Saturday the 17th, today, he was buried in a small cemetery near a village called Durrington on the Avon River, about 1.5 miles from here. He was taken on a gun carriage drawn by 2 horses to the cemetery, and as is the custom in military funerals, only the 12 men who fire the volley over the grave, besides 6 pallbearers and 2 mourners, are allowed. Well, friends, this is the worst task I've ever set out in my life in penning you these few particulars. I can truthfully say you have lost a lad who was a credit to you in every respect, and I hope you will bear up well under your load of sorrow. Well, friends, I have nothing else to say except that I am broken-hearted, and I cannot yet realise that the best friend I ever had was gone. Let us hope to a less troublous world, and hoping that I may be spared to see you all again. I will find out and forward all particulars should you want any tombstone placed on his grave. Signed, Private W.J. Sheehan. So yes, bit sad, I'm going to have to say. Bit sad. Now, I'm just going to share screen. I'm a little bit, I did get a little bit flustered there because actually I've recorded all this before, and I paused the video after where did I pause the video? I paused the video and then I forgot to restart it. And so this second part I'm having to redo again. Sucks. All right, I'm just going to share a little bit more of Oliver's war records, and just to show you what else it says here. So you'll see here, you may not be able to actually understand the writing, but I'll show you. It said he died of disease at Fargo Military Hospital on the 14th of the 2nd, 17, and buried right-hand side of path, Durrington Cemetery. I think that says Wills Grove, number 197, on the 17th of the 2nd. So yeah, his war records are not, overly filled with much battle and going here, there, and everywhere. His file was surprisingly thick, I thought, when I did get my hands on it, considering how little time he spent over in England. But there are some letters to and forward between Henry and the army to do with getting his personal property back, which is what these are. And there's further, that's more about his personal effects. So what did he have? He had a pair of mittens, a pair of gloves, wristlet watch and strap, pipe, scarf, hold all, hairbrush, comb in case, 2 shaving brushes, 2 razors in cases, razor strap, a leather belt, knife in lanyard, 3 badges, notebook, postcards, handkerchief, photos, letters, and a halfpenny. There you go. That's all his goods and chattels. So yeah, it does go on a little bit, and there's some handwritten letters there from Henry. Is that Henry's writing? No, Mary Ann wrote this one. And this one is, so she's explaining who she's talking about, who died in the Fargo Military Hospital, England, on the 14th of February last, had in his possession when admitted a wristlet watch, which was presented to him before his departure for active service by many friends. Yet, although I have written to nurse who attended him, who wrote telling me of his sickness, and that was Sister M.M. Dalrymple, which that was lovely, I have had no reply. The watch was suitably inscribed with his name engraved on the back. Would you be so kind as to make inquiries and do your best as to procure the watch for me Not for its value, but as a keepsake, I would like to have it. And yeah, on it goes. So that sadly is the tale, as I said, of Oliver Goldsmith. Let's go back to our little slideshow. A couple more photos to show you, and that'll tie it up. So I did find this one photo of a ward inside the Fargo Hospital, and I'm saying they spruced it up with some pretty flowers and things, maybe for the photos. I'm not sure, but yeah, there is a thumb in the corner of that by someone holding it up. But I wanted to find a realistic photo of what the ward looked like inside, and that was the only one I came across. And then we've got Oliver's in memoriam card, and there's a little verse on this side. Did you like my little circle? I've got some new options. I can have little circles. And it's basically about how his death was such a shock. And then on the other side, we've got the details, which is Oliver Matthew James Goldsmith, beloved son of Henry and M.A. Goldsmith, who died while on active service 14th of February 1917. Now, I will say, it then says aged 21 years and 18 months. They did get how old he was wrong, because he actually turned 22 by the time he passed away. And then here we can see on my side, you can see the cross, the temporary cross that was put up. Now, for some of the soldiers, whose families couldn't afford to get a headstone, that was what was there. And when that was gone, then it was wasn't as easy for them to actually find the graves. But the Goldsmiths were not short of a penny, so they were able to get the headstone put up. So that is over there. I didn't want to leave this little presentation on a sad note, so I thought I would just extend the story a little bit. Now, we spoke about the fact that Oliver had a twin sister, and her name was Lilian, and this is his sister right here. And I've just got a couple of photos of her there, but I do have something quite interesting to tell, and let me just bring that up for you. I will just enlarge that a little. Right. Should be better. Yes, that's better for you. Lil's quite an interesting character. And Henry, once after Oliver's passing, Lil sort of took his spot on the farm. And because Oliver was the one that used to drive his father around in the motor car when they got a motor car, and, things like that, and did all the messages for Henry and stuff. And so Lil took over doing all that stuff. But here, just to give end the story on a happy note, and this is the following year. So this is dated the 15th of October 1918, and the article is entitled "A Long Motor Trip, and What Do You Know? Whoopee! Girl drives a car." Mr. and Mrs. H. Goldsmith have recently returned to Coorak with their family from Darling Downs, Queensland, per motor. Mr. Goldsmith, it will be remembered, settled in Coorak about 46 years ago. 10 years back, he left that district in search of land in Queensland, taking with a party of young men in order to take up a group settlement, these settlements being at that time available over there. Oh, over there, be up there? Perhaps the geography mightn't have been so great. Among his group was Mr. Godfrey Morgan, former editor of this newspaper, who is now member for Marilla in that state. Mr. Goldsmith relates his recent return journey as a long and tiresome one. The car, which was driven the whole of the way by his daughter, what a feat! A woman drives a car all that way. Miss Lilian May Goldsmith carried 5 persons and about half a ton of luggage. The weather conditions were very unfavourable and the roads exceptionally bad, and in one instance 100 miles or more of a detour had to be made. Altogether, the party was a month on the road. The driving of a car all that way under adverse conditions is a most unique performance for a girl, and she deserves the greatest credit for the manner in which she piloted her charge safely to its destination. Miss Goldsmith's twin brother, after having enlisted, died from pneumonia whilst at Salisbury Plains in England. After his departure from home, we are informed that his twin sister succeeded him in almost everything. She took his place at the steering wheel in the car and likewise in the saddle among the stock. with the result that she is now a capable motor driver and an expert equestrian. Being twins, the usual affinity existed between them, and her brother, prior to his death, sent her his pay, which she brought with her from Queensland and invested in the 7th War Loan in Donald on Saturday week. There you go. So, what a feat. It is a long way. I have driven from whence they came. No, well, I didn't. I drove from here to where they lived up in Queensland a few years ago, and I took my youngest child, Brittany, with me, and we went up there to meet the relatives that we hadn't met before, but had corresponded with quite a bit over family history, and went up to have a look at the farm and the prickly pear and, yeah, all that sort of stuff. So that was a really good time. So I do know how long it is. It didn't take us a month. It took us about 4 days, I think, because we did stop a bit. We did stop quite a few places, and yeah, it was interesting. But yeah, that's how much times have changed since then. Anyway, that's my family history story for this week. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you all next time. Bye now.